They say the past is buried, sealed beneath stone, sand, and silence. But if you listen closely, history whispers, and sometimes it screams. Not with words, but with questions, with wounds that never healed, and with crimes that were never solved. The ancient world was not just temples, empires, and kings. It was also blood on palace floors, poisons slipped into golden cups, blades hidden in torchlight, and bodies left in places where no answer could ever be found. Sit back, relax, but keep your senses sharp, because tonight we step into the oldest crime scenes known to humanity, from the boy king of Egypt whose death still divides scholars, to prophets cut down in their temples, emperors obsessed with immortality who died, chasing it, and rulers whose ends were so strange they sound more like myth than memory. We will walk through tombs that curse, swamps that preserve their victims like gruesome time capsules, and palaces where betrayal left no fingerprints, only silence. Some researchers believe these deaths were natural, the inevitable end of fragile human lives. Others suggest darker forces, assassins, conspiracies, or rituals meant to satisfy gods with blood. And as we move through each case, you'll see how history itself has acted as the perfect accomplice, covering the evidence with centuries of dust. Yet still, the mystery remains. Were these accidents of fate, or carefully hidden crimes? Let's begin with one of the most famous mysteries ever unearthed: the strange, silent death of Tutankhamun, the boy king of Egypt. It begins in the Valley of the Kings. 1922. A door is opened that had been sealed for more than 3,000 years. The tomb of Tutankhamun, a boy who became pharaoh before his voice had even deepened, was found almost intact, dazzling with gold yet suffocating in silence. Howard Carter, the archaeologist who made the discovery, recalled seeing wonderful things, but behind the splendor lingered a question far heavier than gold. Why did Tutankhamun die so young? He was only around 18 or 19, an age when life should just be beginning. The murals on his tomb walls show a royal funeral, a hurried one, as if death had come too suddenly. In the quiet chambers filled with funerary treasures, there was no note of natural decline, no sign of a ruler who had been prepared for death, only a stillness that felt unnatural, like a secret sealed in stone. For centuries, Tutankhamun's name was forgotten by history, erased by successors who tried to blot him out. Yet in death, he became immortal, his story louder than the great kings who overshadowed him. And as the flickering lamplight danced on the walls of his burial chamber, scholars and scientists began to wonder, had the boy king fallen ill? Or had someone ensured his reign would be cut short? When modern science finally touched the ancient bones of Tutankhamun, the body told a story more complicated than any myth. X-rays taken in the 1960s showed fragments of bone within the skull, leading some to whisper of a fatal blow, perhaps the work of an assassin who struck the boy down in the night. Later scans revealed damage to the chest, ribs missing, the sternum gone almost, as if his body had been deliberately mutilated. But was this the hand of murder, or simply the ravages of time and a rushed burial? DNA studies added more layers, suggesting Tutankhamun suffered from malaria, bone disease, and a deformed foot that left him limping, weakened. Yet even these findings raised questions. Could such ailments alone bring death to a pharaoh, or did they make him vulnerable to enemies within his own court? Some researchers point to Ai, the vizier who succeeded him, or Horemheb, the general who claimed the throne later. Both stood to gain from his untimely end. Others argue the evidence of trauma shows a chariot accident, an accident suspiciously convenient. Each clue seemed to shine with promise, then dissolve into mist. In the golden coffin lay not just a body, but a crime scene no modern detective could quite reconstruct. And so Tutankhamun remains a riddle. His tomb was filled with treasures meant to secure eternal peace, but instead it became a courtroom of theories. Was he assassinated by those closest to him, poisoned or struck down, so that older men could wear the crown? Was he the victim of illness, his body collapsing under the weight of genetic frailty? Or perhaps an accident sealed his fate, leaving Egypt scrambling to bury him quickly before the truth could be seen? Some even whisper that the unusual burning of his body, found in recent studies to be the result of a chemical reaction after burial, suggests fire touched him in death, an omen of violence, or a botched mummification to hide wounds. Each possibility is both convincing and incomplete, a puzzle missing its center. But maybe that is the true power of Tutankhamun. In life, he was a forgotten pharaoh of little importance. In death, he became the most famous name of ancient Egypt, his story retold in every whisper of conspiracy, every shadow on a CT scan. And so the boy king keeps his silence, his golden mask watching us with eyes that seem to know the answer, but will never speak it. And with that silence, we move from Egypt's desert sands to another figure whose death drips with suspicion, not a king this time, but a prophet. The mysterious and violent end of Zoroaster in the shifting landscapes of ancient Persia, where empires rose and collapsed like sand dunes under the wind. A single man carried a vision that would ripple through history. His name was Zoroaster, or Zarathustra, a prophet whose voice spoke of one eternal God, Ahura Mazda, and of a battle between light and darkness that played out not just among the stars, but in every human soul. His teachings would shape empires, influencing Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Yet the man himself remains cloaked in mystery. We do not know the century of his birth with certainty. Some place him as far back as 1200 BC, others closer to 600 BC. What is certain is that he lived in a world of violent tribes, a world where warlords ruled with iron and priests clung tightly to their rituals. Zoroaster's message of morality, truth, and cosmic order was not gentle philosophy, it was rebellion. He challenged the old gods, dismantled ancient traditions, and called on men to choose sides between good and evil. That kind of message does not come without enemies. And so, like many prophets who dared to speak of truth in a world of shadows, Zoroaster's life would end not in peace, but in blood. The story of Zoroaster's death is less a record, more a whispered crime passed down through fragments of tradition. The prophet was said to have been around 77 years old, an age of wisdom and frailty when his enemies finally struck. Some accounts place him inside a temple, the sacred fire burning before him, when assassins broke through the sanctum. One warrior, a Turanian invader, is said to have driven a blade deep into the prophet's body, cutting him down in the very house of his god. Imagine the scene, the flames crackling, smoke curling toward the heavens, and amidst it, a prophet collapsing, his voice silenced mid-prayer. Others claim it was not foreign invaders, but rival priests who could no longer tolerate his disruption of their ancient order. Perhaps they orchestrated the murder, hiding it behind the chaos of raids. But the truth is blurred, like ink smeared on parchment. Was Zoroaster's death a political assassination, a religious vendetta, or an accident of war? We do not know. What we do know is that his end was violent, sudden, and shrouded in secrecy, exactly the way one erases a dangerous man from the world. while leaving just enough of his words to haunt the ages. And yet, even in death, Zoroaster refused to disappear. His followers carried his teachings into the courts of kings, embedding his ideas into the great Achaemenid Empire. Fire temples rose across Persia, each flame a reminder that their prophet's voice had not been extinguished, only transformed. But the unanswered question lingered. Who killed him, and why? Was it the Turanian raiders, the eternal enemies of his people, storming temples in an act of conquest? Or was it betrayal from within priests and nobles whose power he had undermined? The manner of his death became part of the mythos, fitting his own teachings that the world was a battlefield between truth and lies, light and darkness. Perhaps his assassination was inevitable, a physical act mirroring the cosmic struggle he preached. Even centuries later, Zoroastrians told his story with a kind of reverence and unease, as if acknowledging that their prophet had been silenced by human violence, yet had transcended it through memory. His murder remains a riddle with no confession, a crime scene lost in the ashes of time. And so the prophet, like the boy king before him, speaks only in silence. But now, let us turn from Persia's burning temples to the marble courts of Greece, where a philosopher named Socrates faced his own death sentence, not by dagger, but by poison, delivered in the name of justice. In the heart of Athens, under the weight of marble columns and the restless murmur of democracy, an old man stood accused. His name was Socrates, a philosopher whose very method was to ask questions, to strip away the false certainties of politicians, poets, and craftsmen until only ignorance remained exposed. To some, he was a gadfly sent by the gods to sting the city into awareness. To others, he was a corrupter, a man who undermined tradition, mocked the gods, and led the youth astray. The charges against him were twofold: impiety and corruption of the young. In a society proud of its thinkers, proud of its democracy, here stood a man accused of thinking too much, of questioning too deeply. Imagine the courtroom, not a silent chamber, but an open gathering. Nearly 500 jurors crowded together, citizens judging the fate of a single philosopher. His accusers spoke with conviction. This man poisons the minds of youth with doubt. This man dishonors the gods of Athens. This man is dangerous. When it was his turn to answer, Socrates did not beg for mercy. He did not flatter. He spoke of virtue, of truth, of the examined life. And in the silence that followed, the jurors cast their votes. By a narrow margin, the philosopher was condemned. His punishment, death. The method of execution in Athens was not flame or blade, but poison. Hemlock, a plant that once brewed into a lethal drink, would slowly paralyze the body, drawing death upward from the feet to the heart. On the appointed day, Socrates sat with his students in a dim prison cell, the clatter of guards faint beyond the stone walls. Plato, his devoted disciple, would later write the account, describing the moment with haunting clarity. The cup was brought to Socrates. He asked, calmly, almost casually, about the proper way to drink it, as though inquiring about wine at a banquet. Then he lifted it, drank deeply, and set it down without trembling. His friends wept, some turning their faces away, but Socrates spoke gently, even smiling. He told them not to grieve, for death was either a deep sleep without dreams, or a passage to another world where he could continue questioning. As the poison spread, he felt his legs grow heavy. He lay down on the bed, his body stiffening, his breath slowing. The last words recorded from his lips were directed to a disciple, a request to offer a cock to Asclepius, the god of healing, as if death itself were a kind of cure. And then the philosopher fell silent, leaving his followers trembling in the stillness of the cell. The death of Socrates was not the end of a man, it was the beginning of a legend. His execution shook Athens, but not in the way his judges intended. They thought they were silencing a troublemaker, removing a thorn from the city's flesh. Instead, they created a martyr of philosophy. Plato, present that day, carried the memory of his teacher into every dialogue he wrote, immortalizing the moment as an act of wisdom, courage, and defiance. Aristotle would later inherit that lineage, shaping Western thought for centuries. And so, the state that killed Socrates unwittingly guaranteed that his voice would echo louder than ever, a paradox that history often loves to create. But here lies the deeper mystery. Was Socrates truly guilty? Did he corrupt the youth, or did he awaken them? Was his crime against the gods, or against the fragile pride of Athens itself? His death leaves us with questions that no court could answer, only questions that ripple through time, demanding we confront them ourselves. In the shadow of Socrates, we see not just the fate of one philosopher, but the danger of ideas, the crime of thought itself. And with that, we cross from the stone prisons of Athens to the gilded palaces of Babylon, where the murder of a king's son would shape the fate of an empire. Babylon, city of hanging gardens and towering ziggurats, a jewel of the ancient world, carried within its walls not only wealth but intrigue. Here, power was never secure. It was bought with blood, traded in whispers, and lost in a single night. Among its rulers was King Nebuchadnezzar II, famed for his grand works and ruthless ambition. But even kings are haunted by succession, by the question of who inherits not the throne, but the fragile stability of an empire stretched wide. The story tells of a son, a prince of Babylon, murdered before he could wear the crown. Some say it was fratricide, brother against brother, sharpened daggers in the darkness of the palace halls. Others whisper it was orchestrated by jealous courtiers, fearful of losing power once the boy became king. The palace itself would have been a stage of contrasts, the soft rustle of silk robes, the glint of bronze torches, the quiet footfalls of conspirators carrying out their deadly task. When the prince's body was discovered, perhaps poisoned, perhaps strangled, it sent a shiver through Babylonian society. A royal death was never just personal, it was political, it was cosmic. For the Babylonians believed kingship was granted by the gods. To kill a king's heir was to disturb divine order itself, and the punishment would not only fall on men, but on the city that housed such betrayal. What followed the murder was not justice, but fear. The throne of Babylon, draped in gold and encrusted with jewels, was also soaked in suspicion. Who killed the prince? Was it his own blood, another son of Nebuchadnezzar, carving his path to power? Or was it the priests of Marduk, wielding influence behind closed doors, ensuring that only a pliable king would rule? Babylon was a city where politics blurred with prophecy, where dreams were taken as warnings, and omens guided decisions. Some accounts claim that the murder was hushed, hidden beneath ritual and spectacle, as though erasing the air would erase the memory of his existence. Others insist that whispers of the crime spread through the markets, carried by merchants, who spoke of dark omens, of the gods turning their faces away from the city. The greater mystery lies not only in who killed the prince, but in why history itself swallowed the truth. Babylon's records, once so meticulous in their cuneiform tablets, offer only fragments, broken lines of clay that tell us nothing certain. It is as though the city itself wanted to forget, or perhaps feared remembering. From one perspective, the murder of a single prince may seem a footnote in the vast saga of Babylon. Yet in ancient minds, spilled royal blood carried consequences that no city could escape. For to kill a prince was not merely to end a life, but to invite a curse. Stories tell of sudden storms that tore through the city, of crops failing, of strange celestial patterns that priests struggled to interpret. The crime became interwoven with myth, with the belief that the gods themselves demanded retribution. Later, rulers of Babylon, paranoid of their own kin, built their reigns on the fragile balance of fear and loyalty, always aware that the same fate could befall them. And perhaps this is the truest legacy of the prince's murder, not his life, which history barely preserved, but the lesson his death taught that in Babylon, the throne was never inherited, it was seized, often over the body of one's own. Brother, as we leave the shadows of Mesopotamia, the lingering question remains, was Babylon cursed because of its betrayal, or was betrayal always the true heartbeat of empire? With that thought, we travel westward, across deserts and seas, into the marble courts of Rome, where another death, equally shrouded in whispers, would shake the ancient world, the fall of an emperor at the hands of his own. Rome, city of marble, temples and shadowed alleyways, where the roar of the Forum echoed the ambitions of men and the whispers of the Senate carried weight heavier than gold. Here, power was a living, breathing thing, and the emperor, though clothed in purple, was never truly safe. One of Rome's most notorious deaths belongs to an emperor whose life ended not on the battlefield, but within the walls of his own palace. History tells us that Caligula, the little boots of imperial legend, met a violent demise at the hands of his closest guards. Some say it was personal revenge for insults and humiliations. Others suggest political necessity. Tyrant's cruelty had become too dangerous, his whims too unpredictable. The scene of his assassination was a tapestry of tension, the cold echo of stone corridors, the metallic glint of daggers, the muffled footsteps of conspirators, and the sudden chaos of betrayal. His body, sprawled on the palace floor, became the ultimate symbol of Rome's lethal politics. To kill an emperor was to touch the very pulse of the Republic, to strike at the fragile balance between absolute authority and mortal vulnerability. And yet, the story does not end with his death. The city itself seemed to react. As if aware of the rupture, citizens whispered of omens, of celestial signs, of sudden storms that mirrored the violence of Rome's heart. The death of Caligula was not merely a murder. It was a signal, a dark prelude to centuries of intrigue and betrayal that would haunt the empire long after marble columns crumbled. After the assassination, Rome's streets did not return to calm. Senators and guards alike walked in silence, aware that the line between loyalty and self-preservation was as thin as a dagger's edge. Some historians argue that the plot against the emperor was coordinated by members of the Senate, fearful that his erratic decisions threatened their own survival. Others suggest that the Praetorian Guard acted independently, driven by a mix of resentment, ambition, and the promise of reward from the next ruler. The power vacuum that followed was immediate, palpable. The city vibrated with anxiety, uncertainty, and the quiet hum of conspiracies yet to unfold. Within the palace, the rooms that once hosted lavish feasts now smelled of blood and oil lamps. The air, heavy with tension, seemed to hold the collective fear of men who knew the fragility of life in Rome. And yet, even in the chaos, myths began to grow. Tales of the emperor's ghost wandering the halls, of whispers in the Senate chambers, predicting doom for the conspirators, entered the realm of legend. Rome had become a city of shadows, where every decision could be fatal, every glance could betray. The line between history and horror blurred, and the lesson was clear. Power in Rome was a prize, but a deadly one, and those who sought it had to embrace the risk of dying as publicly as they had lived. The murder of an emperor leaves more than just a vacant throne. It leaves a question that haunts historians, archaeologists, and storytellers alike. Could such a death have been avoided, or was it inevitable? Caligula's life, so intricately entwined with superstition, prophecy, and human ambition, seems almost scripted for tragedy. Some researchers believe that his downfall was accelerated by mental instability, by the isolation that absolute power can bring. Others suggest it was the culmination of years of political plotting, carefully orchestrated by those who understood Rome's appetite for drama and blood. The marble streets, the silent temples, the forum where laws were debated or stand. As witnesses to a truth we cannot fully know, in Rome, death was never just a personal event. It was public, symbolic, and, in many ways, necessary. As we leave the eternal city, we carry with us the echo of footsteps in stone corridors, the glint of blades in dim torchlight, and the lingering tension of lives ended too soon. From Rome, our journey moves north, beyond the Alps, to the icy expanse of the Viking world, where raids, betrayals, and mysterious deaths would craft a saga equally dark and fascinating. But before we cross those snow-covered shores, we must ask ourselves, did the emperor's death alter history? Or was it merely one thread in a tapestry woven from ambition, fear, and the inescapable human desire for power? Imagine the North Sea wind whipping across a cliffside, the smell of salt and wet stone thick in the air, and the cries of seagulls echoing against jagged rocks. Here, in the harsh lands of Scandinavia, lived Ragnar Lothbrok, the legendary Viking chieftain whose exploits straddled history and myth. He was a man who raided kingdoms, sought riches, and courted danger as easily as he drew breath. Yet even the fiercest warrior is not immune to death, and Ragnar's end remains one of history's most haunting mysteries. Captured by King L of Northumbria, some sources claim he was thrown into a pit of venomous snakes, a slow, agonizing death designed to terrify. Others suggest he may have been executed differently, a more politically expedient method lost to time. The details are hazy, blurred by saga's oral tradition and the embellishments of storytellers across centuries. But the imagery lingers. A man encircled by serpents, his final breaths punctuated by hisses and the cold touch of fear. A king brought low not on a battlefield, but in a pit designed to break his spirit. Some researchers believe the tales may have been symbolic, representing the fall of a legendary figure whose death was meant to mark the triumph of one kingdom over another, while others hold that it was literal, a reminder that even heroes are mortal. Ragnar's death did not end his story. It ignited one of the most infamous Viking revenge campaigns in history. As his sons Bjorn, Ivar, and Sigurd sought retribution with blood and fire, the sagas themselves become characters, blending fact with myth, and the question remains: was Ragnar Lothbrok's death an execution, a legend, or a dark warning whispered across generations? As the waves crash below the cliffs, we are reminded that history, especially in the Viking world, is never certain, and some deaths are too dramatic to be easily explained. From the cliffs of Northumbria, we now sail deeper into Viking lore, where betrayal, mystery, and the chilling certainty of mortality await. If Ragnar's death is steeped in legend, his son Ivar the Boneless presents a historical enigma wrapped in both awe and fear. A brilliant strategist and feared warrior, Ivar's body was reportedly weak, his limbs fragile, yet his mind was a battlefield weapon sharper than any sword. He commanded armies with unmatched cunning, leading the great heathen army into England, toppling kingdoms with precision and ruthlessness. Yet even the cleverest of minds cannot escape mortality. Sources suggest that Ivar died around 873 CE, but the exact cause of his death is a puzzle historians have long debated. Some argue he succumbed to complications from his physical ailments, a life limited by fragile bones, yet driven by unparalleled intellect. Others whisper of foul play and assassination by those threatened by his expanding power, a betrayal within the very army he led to victory. His burial is equally mysterious. Legends say he was interred in a barrow, a mound designed to honor warriors, yet the location remains unconfirmed, hidden beneath centuries of soil and forgotten tales. Ivar's death, like his life, is wrapped in paradox, a man of fragility, whose impact was monumental, whose final moments are obscured by time, yet whose story continues to shape our understanding of Viking ambition, violence, and cunning. Scholars and storytellers alike ponder the implications. Was his death inevitable? A natural end to a life defined by strategy and warfare? Or was it a calculated act of revenge, leaving a void that reverberated through Viking society? From the foggy battlefields of England to the whispered legends of Scandinavian fjords, Ivar the Boneless stands as a testament to the uneasy intersection of legend, history, and the unknown. Next, we cross from blood-soaked raids to the icy waters where Viking ships vanished, leaving behind only the whispers of those lost at sea, the sound of waves crashing against timber and stone, the icy wind cutting through firs, and the eerie creak of a longship drifting into foggy waters. This is the stage for some of the most mysterious Viking deaths ever recorded. Across the coasts of Scandinavia, hundreds of ships were sent on expeditions, some never to return. Archaeological evidence hints at tragedies at sea. Ships discovered buried in burial mounds, vessels frozen in ice, and the skeletal remains of crews discovered in unexpected locations. Some researchers believe that these sailors were victims of violent storms, sudden icy currents, or simple misnavigation in uncharted waters. Others suggest darker explanations: attacks by rival clans, piracy, or ritualistic sacrifices meant to appease gods or protect the community. Consider the famous Oseberg ship burial. 2 women were interred with incredible wealth, and some believe their deaths were ritualistic, a deliberate act tied to the journey of their lord or leader into the afterlife. The precise circumstances are unknowable, shrouded in ritual, legend, and the slow decay of time. The Viking ships themselves become ghostly monuments, resting beneath soil or water, silent witnesses to lives extinguished, ambitions cut short, and the precariousness of human existence in a harsh and unpredictable world. As we leave the longships, drifting into shadowed fjords, the message is clear. Even the most organized, formidable warriors are at the mercy of the unknown. From the icy seas, our journey moves inland, to the kingdoms and courts where intrigues and assassinations painted history with blood. The mysteries of Viking deaths, both at sea and on land, remind us that mortality is universal, and that even in legend, the line between fact and myth is as thin as a dagger's edge. Picture a grand hall in Paris, torches flickering against towering stone walls, the scent of roasted meats mingling with candle wax, and nobles whispering secrets behind gilded columns. It is the late 14th century, and King Charles VI of France, known both as Charles the Mad and a ruler of fragile mind, sits at the head of the banquet table. His court is a maze of intrigue, ambition, and danger. A place where alliances shift, like sand, and treachery lurks behind every smile. One of the enduring mysteries of his reign revolves around the strange and sudden deaths of several of his closest advisors. Some were rumored to have been poisoned, their chalices tainted with substances that left them writhing in agony before life drained away. Chroniclers from the period describe symptoms that modern researchers have debated for centuries: convulsions, delirium, and sudden collapse. Yet there are no definitive records of the poison used, if any at all. Others argue that these deaths may have been exaggerated by rivals to further blacken the king's court, where fear and rumor were as potent as any blade. The question lingers: were these untimely deaths the result of calculated murder, the king's own madness, or the harsh realities of medieval life, where disease and contamination were common? Charles himself suffered from episodes of severe mental illness, and some scholars speculate that his erratic behavior may have contributed to these deaths indirectly, influencing decisions that put men in harm's way. Yet, the allure of a poisoner, hiding in plain sight, moving silently through corridors of power, continues to fascinate. As the shadows of the torchlight dance across the hall, one can almost hear the whispers of nobles warning each other, the clinking of goblets, and the quiet footsteps of a figure who may have been both judge and executioner. From this court of intrigue, we move next to another medieval enigma, where betrayal and political ambition would leave a kingdom reeling for decades. Now, step into the cold, damp stone corridors of the Tower of London, the fog rolling in over the Thames like a shroud. It is 1483, and the city is tense with uncertainty. Two young boys, Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury, have been lodged in the tower, ostensibly for protection, yet they are never seen again. Their disappearance remains one of England's most chilling mysteries. Some historians point the finger at their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, later Richard III, suggesting ambition and the ruthless hunger for power drove him to eliminate potential rivals. Others argue that foreign enemies, disaffected nobles, or even guards could have played a role, each theory leaving behind tantalizing hints but no definitive answers. The tower itself seems to echo with the ghosts of these children, narrow windows and shadowed stairwells amplifying whispers of fear and despair. Contemporary accounts speak of cries in the night, secret messages intercepted and lost, yet nothing concrete emerged to explain their fates. Bones were later discovered beneath a staircase, but whether they belonged to the missing princes is debated to this day, leaving historians and the public with more questions than answers. What is certain is that the tower, a symbol of authority and imprisonment, became a theatre for one of the most enigmatic crimes in English history. From the candlelit halls of royal courts to the echoing chambers of the tower, the line between murder, disappearance, and political maneuvering blurs. As you imagine those narrow stone steps and the small figures of two boys walking into oblivion, we move from royal halls to darker alleys, where medieval cities hide secrets far more violent and hidden from history's light. Now, picture the fog-laden forests of 15th century France, the distant clatter of hooves echoing through shadowed glades, and the cold eyes of a nobleman whose deeds would horrify even the bravest of knights. Gilles de Rais, once a celebrated military commander and companion in arms to Joan of Arc, became infamous not for heroism but for the most heinous of crimes. Accused of abducting, torturing, and murdering dozens of children, his trial reads like a descent into the darkest corners of human depravity. Contemporary records describe chambers adorned with grotesque symbols, rituals that combine cruelty with a twisted sense of the occult, and victims whose screams may have echoed unnoticed in the forests. Some suggest de Rais was driven by madness, others by greed and occult obsession. A few even propose political motivations, seeking to tarnish a once revered figure. The evidence presented at his trial was shocking, yet scholars debate the accuracy and fairness of the proceedings, questioning whether the confessions extracted were genuine or coerced through fear and torture. De Rais was ultimately executed. In 1440, his death, a public spectacle meant to both punish and warn. Yet, centuries later, historians and criminologists remain haunted by the questions: how could a man of such stature descend so completely into darkness? And how much of the horror attributed to him is fact versus legend? The forests of Western France still hold the memory of these crimes, silent witnesses to acts of violence that defy understanding. From the foggy woodlands, we move now into the shadowy courts and alleys of Italy, where ambition, intrigue, and murder intertwine in mysteries that have puzzled scholars for centuries. Imagine Florence in the late 15th century, cobbled streets, glistening with rain, the scent of fresh bread mingling with incense from the cathedral, and city towers casting long shadows over a city alive with art, ambition, and dangerous alliances. Lorenzo de' Medici, known as Lorenzo the Magnificent, ruled not only through wealth and influence, but through careful manipulation of friends and enemies alike. Behind the beauty of Renaissance architecture and music, power struggles simmered in dimly lit chambers. Several of Lorenzo's political rivals met mysterious deaths, poisoned wines, sudden falls, or assassinations hidden in the fog of public events. Contemporary letters hint at secret councils, coded messages, and servants complicit in plots that would decide the fate of families and fortunes. Some historians suggest these murders were acts of political necessity, a way to secure Florence from external threats and internal betrayal. Others propose darker motives: jealousy, personal vendettas, or even supernatural beliefs about curses and omens influencing the Medici. The exact methods and perpetrators remain unknown, leaving a trail of shadows and half-told stories. As you imagine candlelight flickering across velvet drapes and the soft shuffle of footsteps in corridors meant for secrets, you can feel the tension of a city where art and death walk hand in hand. From the palaces of Florence, we move next to a crime that shook the very foundations of Venice, where water and shadow hide a mystery still debated today. Now drift with me to Venice, the labyrinth of canals and stone bridges, gondolas slicing silently through midnight waters, lanterns reflecting on ripples, as if the city itself were breathing secrets. In 1501, a wealthy merchant who had been a benefactor to the young scholar Pietro Bembo vanished without a trace. His gondola was found empty, moored near a quiet canal, and the merchant's personal belongings remained untouched. Some scholars of the period speculated that rival merchants, envious of his influence and fortune, may have orchestrated the disappearance. Others whisper of secret political machinations, perhaps the hand of a Venetian noble seeking to assert power over commerce and culture. Bembo himself wrote of the loss with a subtle unease, hinting at fears of hidden enemies and the fragility of fortune. Modern historians are equally puzzled. Was this a kidnapping? a murder disguised as disappearance? Or did the merchant simply flee with secret wealth? The mystery endures, amplified by the haunting beauty of Venice itself, where shadows in narrow alleys and the soft lap of water against stone can conceal untold crimes. As night falls over the canals, we feel the city's pulse, alive with stories that never reach the light of day, where ambition, betrayal, and silent violence intertwine. From the misty canals, we journey next to Florence's darker alleys once more, where a secret society would commit acts that left the city whispering for decades. Now picture Rome at the height of Renaissance splendor, marble palaces, frescoed ceilings, and streets bustling with merchants, scholars, and the clergy. Yet behind the grandeur lurked one of history's most infamous families, the Borgias. Cesare and Lucretia Borgia are remembered not only for their ambition and beauty, but for the deadly methods they allegedly used to secure power. Poisoning was whispered to be their specialty, a faint taste in wine, a slow-acting powder hidden in pastries, a subtle fragrance masking fatal toxins. Contemporary accounts describe sudden deaths at banquets, mysterious illnesses among rivals, and the quiet disappearance of those who crossed the family. Some historians believe these tales were exaggerated by political enemies seeking to tarnish the Borgias' legacy, yet forensic analysis of skeletal remains and letters from the period suggest that foul play was likely. The psychological precision, the planning, the timing, the manipulation of perception paints a picture of power wielded as a weapon, where the line between political strategy and cold-blooded murder blurred completely. As we move through the corridors of Vatican intrigue, the echo of footsteps on polished marble seems almost a warning, a reminder that in this era, influence was inseparable from danger. From Rome, we will journey next to the shadowy forests of northern Europe, where witch trials and secret killings would intertwine with fear, superstition, and the deadly power of rumor. Imagine the fog rolling over the Lancashire hills in early 17th century England, mist weaving between gnarled trees and stone cottages, carrying whispers of fear and suspicion. In 1612, 12 people from the area around Pendle Hill were accused of witchcraft, their lives unraveling amid hysteria, superstition, and old grudges. Some were elderly women, others younger villagers. All were ordinary people whose neighbors suddenly eyed them with suspicion. The accusations ranged from curses on livestock to mysterious deaths, and each claim was backed by confessions extracted under intense pressure or torture. Some researchers believe these trials were fueled not just by fear of the supernatural, but by land disputes, personal benditas, and a society desperate for control in uncertain times. Witnesses describe strange marks on bodies, secret meetings, and odd behavior, while the accused insisted on their innocence, weaving tales of daily life misunderstood or twisted into evidence of dark magic. When the 12 were hanged, the air of Pendle carried a lingering unease, as if the hills themselves held memory of injustice. The trial records survive, but they raise more questions than they answer. Were these deaths the result of genuine belief in witchcraft, or the manipulation of fear to serve power and greed? The fog on Pendle Hill seems eternal, and as it curls over the landscape, it keeps the secrets of those fateful days hidden in its damp embrace. From these hills, we travel next to the shadowed streets of Paris, where a scandal involving poison and intrigue would terrify the aristocracy and reveal the deadly games of court life. Now picture Paris in the late 17th century, gilded halls glittering with crystal chandeliers, perfumed salons alive with whispers and laughter, yet beneath them, elegance lurked a sinister current of fear. Between 1677 and 1682, a series of mysterious deaths and disappearances rocked the French aristocracy, an event historians call the Affair of the Poisons. Poisoners, fortune-tellers, and occult practitioners were implicated, with some accused of selling deadly concoctions to ambitious nobles eager to remove rivals. Rumors swirled that even members of the royal court were involved, seeking illicit means to secure wealth, power, or forbidden love. Contemporary accounts describe women and men suddenly falling ill, servants disappearing, and letters hinting at plots that never reached the public eye. Some researchers suggest this scandal reflected the anxiety of a society obsessed with hierarchy and reputation, while others argue it exposed a deliberate network of murder for hire operating in the shadows of Versailles. Investigations were secretive, confessions often coerced, and evidence sometimes destroyed or hidden to protect powerful figures. The city seemed to hold its breath, every whispered conversation carrying the weight of potential death. As we move from the glittering salons of Paris, we turn to a remote region of Scotland, where superstition, isolation, and violent crime converge in a tale of betrayal and blood on the Highlands. Transport yourself to Perth, Scotland, in 1600, Coldstone. Streets, mist curling over the River Tay, and the imposing Gowrie house looming like a sentinel over the city. The Gowrie conspiracy centers on the mysterious deaths of John and Alexander Ruthven, sons of the powerful Earl of Gowrie, in what some call an attempted assassination of King James VI. Accounts vary wildly. Some suggest the Ruthvens tried to lure the king into a trap. Others propose James orchestrated the deaths to remove a threatening family. The sequence of events remains clouded in contradiction. A sudden attack in a house filled with shadowed corridors, servants fleeing in panic, swords flashing, cries echoing through the stone halls. Contemporary witnesses recorded the chaos, but differed in critical details, and official documents were later manipulated to fit the Crown's narrative. Modern historians debate whether this was a genuine conspiracy, a preemptive strike by the king, or simply the result of political paranoia, spiraling into fatal violence. The atmosphere of Gowrie House seems frozen in that day of fear, betrayal, and death, the stone walls keeping secrets no historian can fully unlock. As night falls over Perth, one question lingers: who truly held the power that day, and who was silenced forever in the shadows? From the Scottish Highlands, we will now journey south to the sun-drenched lands of Spain, where secrets, intrigue, and murder interweave in the courtly life of the Habsburgs. Close your eyes and picture the golden halls of 16th century Madrid, the scent of burning candles and perfume filling the air, tapestries muffling the footsteps of courtiers as secrets and ambitions swirl like smoke. Don Juan of Austria, the illegitimate son of Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, and a celebrated military commander, died suddenly in 1578 at the age of 31. Official records claim he succumbed to typhus, yet rumors quickly spread of poison, intrigue, and betrayal. Some historians believe rival nobles envied his power and charisma, plotting in shadowed corridors with vials of lethal concoctions. Others suggest internal court politics, fears of rebellion, or even foreign espionage played a role. Contemporary accounts describe Don Juan as vibrant, commanding, and widely admired, yet also surrounded by envy and suspicion. The abruptness of his death, combined with the secrecy of the royal chambers, leaves modern researchers questioning whether illness was truly the culprit or merely a convenient explanation for a politically convenient murder. The tension in Madrid palaces, the hush of servants, the faint glint of poisoned goblets, all hint at a world where ambition could easily turn lethal. From the sun-soaked streets of Spain, we now travel across the Mediterranean to the Venetian Republic, a city of canals, masks, and silent vendettas, where intrigue and murder entwined with art and politics. Imagine Venice in the early 16th century. Gondolas sliding silently over midnight canals, masked figures gliding beneath lanterns' glow, and marble palaces reflecting a city both beautiful and dangerous. The assassination of Doge Marino Faliero in 1355 remains one of Venice's darkest mysteries. Faliero, ambitious and increasingly despised by the patricians, was accused of plotting a coup against the ruling council. Historians debate whether he truly conspired to seize power or was the victim of a political setup, betrayed by his closest allies. His arrest and subsequent execution were swift, yet the details surrounding his plot letters, accomplices, and motivations remain shrouded in conflicting accounts. Some sources hint at clandestine meetings in shadowed palaces, whispered oaths, and secret passages known only to a few. Others suggest the Doge's downfall was engineered by jealous rivals seeking to preserve the fragile balance of Venetian power. The city's canals, often glistening under moonlight, seem to echo with the footsteps of those involved, their secrets dissolved into the water. As we leave Venice, with its beauty and menace intertwined, our journey now turns to Florence, where the Medici family wielded influence like a blade, and murders within the city's heart were never far from whispers of power. Step into Florence in 1478, the Arno River glinting like molten silver, cathedral bells ringing through narrow streets, and the scent of incense mingling with tension. The Pazzi conspiracy was a dramatic attempt to overthrow Lorenzo de' Medici, the powerful ruler of Florence, and replace him with their own faction. During High Mass in the Florence Cathedral, conspirators attacked Lorenzo and his brother Giuliano. Giuliano was brutally stabbed to death, while Lorenzo survived, wounded but defiant. The aftermath was chaotic: executions, arrests, and violent. Reprisals swept through Florence, yet questions linger about who orchestrated the plot and how deep the conspiracy reached. Some historians suggest rival families, jealous bankers, and even PayPal involvement, while others highlight personal vendettas and ambitions cloaked in the grandeur of religion and politics. The echo of the cathedral bells, the blood-stained marble floors, the terrified faces of the congregation all remain etched in Florence's history, a city where power, betrayal, and violence coexisted in an uneasy balance. From the heart of Renaissance Florence, we next journey into the frozen reaches of Northern Europe, two mysteries of disappearances and deaths that science and history have yet to explain fully. Step into the mist-laden streets of 15th century London, where fog clings to timbered houses and the distant clang of the city gates echoes like a funeral bell. Two young boys, Edward V and his brother Richard of Shrewsbury, were confined to the Tower of London in 1483, under the guardianship of their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. History records that they vanished without a trace, and their disappearance has haunted England ever since. Some believe Richard, later crowned Richard III, ordered their murder to secure his claim to the throne. Others suggest rival factions or unknown conspirators may have been responsible, hiding their crime behind layers of political intrigue and fear. Chroniclers describe silent corridors shadowed stairways, and the suffocating stillness of the tower where footsteps could betray conspiracies, yet no witness ever came forward. Over centuries, bones allegedly belonging to the princes were discovered beneath the tower's stairs. But definitive identification remained elusive, keeping the mystery alive. The image of these children, trapped, unseen, their fates debated, endlessly casts a long shadow over the history of monarchy and power. As we leave the cold stones of London, we move northward to the frozen expanses of Scandinavia, where disappearances and mysterious deaths continued to baffle those who sought answers. Now, travel to the harsh, snowbound streets of post-war Budapest. 1945, amid the chaos of a collapsing Europe, Raoul Wallenberg, a Swedish diplomat who saved thousands of Jews from the horrors of the Holocaust, was taken into Soviet custody. His fate remains one of the 20th century's most haunting enigmas. Soviet authorities reported his death in 1947, yet conflicting testimonies, secret documents, and rumors suggest he may have lived longer in captivity or met a more sinister end. Some historians argue that Wallenberg was executed as a political pawn. Others speculate he died due to neglect or disease, and some even whisper of clandestine imprisonment in secret facilities. The streets he once walked, the buildings where he hid families in attics and safe houses, now seem to echo with unanswered questions. His disappearance embodies a chilling truth. Even heroism cannot always shield one from the machinations of power, and history sometimes swallows its most courageous figures whole. The silence surrounding his fate reverberates decades later, a reminder of human cruelty, political secrecy, and the mysteries that linger beyond the reach of certainty. As we close this journey through ancient and historical true crimes, we are left with a haunting question. How much of history's darkness remains hidden, waiting for the light of discovery, or perhaps destined never to be revealed?